Hi, hi, hi. Welcome back, everyone. And we are back at the Sacred Partnership Summit talking about power, passion, and polarity. And what about that helps single women attract their dream man? Today with me, I have Scott McKay, and I am so excited to talk to Scott McKay because him and his wife, Emily, sound like they have the most adventurous, amazing relationship, and I just feel like we have got a lot to learn from them. They're going to talk about how to attract and marry your best friend. They are professional dating and relationship coaches, authors, adventure travelers, conference speakers, and media personalities on podcast hosts. They reach over 300,000 people all over the world through their newsletters and podcasts. They are authors of 10 books between them and have been featured on over 400 media outlets worldwide. They have been featured in Grader.com, the world's most influential Facebook users, with Scott as number 1 on the list. Wow. Scott and Emily and their 2 youngest children are BMX racers. That's awesome. Having traveled to well over 100 countries together and proudly world school their 2 youngest children. Scott, that's so fun. I'm on that same bandwagon. We're in Hungary right now, world schooling our side. Also,
I
we were in
am
the
hungry
US.
right now because
Are you?
I haven't had breakfast yet.
Uh-oh. Yeah, because it's really early for you.
No,
Well,
Hungary's
well,
beautiful, gorgeous, and
yes.
friendly with great
Yes.
food. Yes.
Yeah. My hubby is from here, so we thought he'd come and hang out in his hometown. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to pick your brain about how to take control of your dating life and basically talk about some of the things that have to do with dating and why people struggle.
All right. Anything you want to ask? I've been at this a long time. You pretty much can't catch me flat-footed. I can answer any question you got.
And I'm just so grateful to have you like as a man because we always need the men. We
You
always
you
need
wouldn't
and
like
love
me
and
as a
want the men.
woman.
No, I would
No.
absolutely not like you as a woman. So, why do so many people settle for someone they don't even like? Scott.
Well, I'll tell you what, Amelia. It is a very unfortunate, especially in this culture. I think a lot of times people look at television or some other fantastic situation and see this perfect couple, this perfect love, and they go, well, I can't fit that mold. So success at actually having the kind of relationship I would want or that I've been told I should want is just really a fairy tale. It's not something I could really have. Also, when we're younger, we go to school, and in at least amongst men, I don't know if the same is true amongst women, but I hear tell it is that the parents nowadays really don't teach adolescent kids how to relate to the other gender, how to be let alone how to be
Mm-hmm.
attractive. I mean, most boys, or way too many boys, for example, are being raised by single moms who tell their young sons just to be very nice, and the girls will like you.
Mm.
And and also there's the prolonging of adolescence that keeps us in school longer, keeps us out of the workforce longer, keeps us from getting married longer, and a whole lot of pressures against really the nuclear family and men and women getting together and even liking each other. If you
Right.
get on Twitter and just see how men and women relate to each other, it's just really sad. It's unfortunate. And I think all those pressures kind of conspire. The self-esteem pressures, the social pressures conspire to make the vast majority of people believe, Amelia, if I could get anyone to just show up and put up with me, you know, then I'll have at least have someone in my life, and someone is better than nobody. And so what ends up happening is I think people end up settling for someone who isn't very good for them, or someone who they thought someone else would think was right for them, rather than who they really wanted, who they really connected with. I know that mostly women are listening to this, and I work with a lot of men. And I am appalled after so many years of doing this by the high percentage of men who have no idea who they're even looking for. So roll all this up and people sort of accidentally get together and stay together. And it's really no surprise that those aren't the happiest, most fulfilling relationships. And all the time, a lot of times those relationships end up ending.
Right. Yeah, and we're not going to play along with that narrative, are we? We're here to
No.
bust that up a little bit and
Well,
give some
my wife
tips.
and I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys didn't. You guys didn't. So tell me about that. I want to understand, how did you guys get to that place where you just decided not to fall for that and create your life as you're creating it? It sounds like on your own terms. And also you are world schooling your children. So I'm sure you're teaching them things that are different than the mainstream. I'd rather already by what you've already said. But
Right.
yeah.
Well, I don't think you can be the son or daughter of two professional dating coaches and get away with not being very adept at relating to the other gender. So both of my kids are doing particularly well at that. They're 11 and 15 now. But that aside, I said that based on your comment.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to note, Emilia, both Emily and I are on our second marriage. Our first
Mm-hmm.
marriage is respectively ended because of schizophrenia on the part of
Oh,
our
wow.
first respective spouse. So you can imagine when we met each other and realized that our exes were on the same medication.
Oh, wow.
Both of us had gone on a journey not to feel like a victim afterwards. We live in a victimhood culture. I mean, you mentioned that we've been overseas quite a bit and traveled extensively and expensively. You probably could change either consonant in that word. And you're overseas right now also.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of people, I think, it seems like the better off people are, the more blessed we are, the more we complain. So you have a lot of people who think that, our lives here are terrible and that everything's not going well and this, that, and the other. And a lot of people who have a lot going on really revel in feeling like a victim. And really, for most of the world, feeling like a victim is a luxury. And I'm not even sure if that sentence makes sense to a lot of people, but it's true.
Yeah.
So when you're here in the United States, I think people, a lot of times there's big movements for men to blame women for everything, women to blame men for everything. And no one ever sits down with themselves and goes, well, how could I be more attractive? How could I be a better boyfriend or a girlfriend or a wife or husband? And I think one of the beautiful facets of the gem that is my relationship with my wife is both of us were on that journey and had been for a while when we met each other of not being a victim, of taking control over what we could take control of and being more attractive and being a better potential spouse the second time around. Because like me, Emily was told, hey, your husband was crazy. My wife was crazy. There's nothing else you could have done. You can't fix that. You were a great husband, great father. Just, I'm sorry, man. Sorry that happened to you. So instead of it happening to me, I wanted it to happen for me. And that led to me doing what it took to learn what I could and put into practice what I could to be better at this whole relationship thing. And lo and behold, it started working because it was very practical. And my wife was doing the same thing, Emily, before we met. And when we met together, we both were optimistic, generous, and ready to be one half of a great relationship each. And I think the most important factor that I think I've already mentioned, the optimism and the generosity. You pit that against being pessimistic, like, all women are the same or all men are the same, they're all awful. And kind of, the N word narcissism is floated around a lot nowadays, kind of glibly, kind of like gaslighting. I knew what gaslighting was before gaslighting was cool, by the way. But if you're optimistic, then you're not thinking the worst of someone before they've had a chance to reflect it. Or and if you're generous, then you're a giver instead of a taker, in a world where it seems like everybody is even conditioned to say, what can I get out of this relationship? How can I get a man to do something for me? How can I get a woman to do something for me? So we both had that going in. And the third leg of that stool was we had both gotten pretty good at attracting pretty faces. So that wasn't merely enough. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, she's so hot, I got to make sure I keep her sticking around. It's got to be, it became more of, well, I'm really attracted to her, but she's one of me. She's on my team. We think alike. We can anticipate each other's thoughts. I know what's going on in that pretty little head of hers. You know, my wife and I complete each other's sentences when we talk. Anybody who's ever listened to our podcast has kind of heard that. And so I'm married to my best friend, who I'm still just wildly hot for. And I think that's the secret.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm so curious because one of the topics that I'm going to really focus in on this summit is polarity. Polarity. So how does that play a part in your hotness, or does it? Do you experience that to be a necessity to create hotness in your best friend love affair?
You know, masculinity has taken a hit lately because everybody uses the word toxic in tandem with the term masculinity. But that's really just a hit job, because masculinity isn't meant to be toxic. Masculinity is meant to be virtuous, just like femininity is meant to be virtuous. If you look at ethics or virtue, and you see the good as the perfect, as the unspoiled, and you see the vice as the reverse of it, the perversion of it, then toxicity has to spoil something which is good. Something good can't come out of something that is toxic. So men are to be providers and heroes, and the way I put it is that I believe femininity is the higher calling. Masculinity are the providers, protectors, enablers of an environment where femininity can thrive. And I think if you ask any woman, she wants to feel safe. Women are all about feeling safe and feeling surrounded, you know, with love and in an environment where they don't have to worry about those things that are really down in the base of Maslow's hierarchy, like not getting shot at, or, you know, food on the table, or stuff like that. You know, that's men as the hunters, and, you know, in a tribal primal sense, yes, right. Nowadays, I mean, the reality of the life we live means our day-to-day lives are a little more evolved, right? But at the primal level, that desire for a man to be a provider, protector, and a hero, and for a woman to bring the feminine gifts which she's freed up to give, which create the aesthetic beauty in this life, the joy, the fun, the play, all of those things that women are so good at bringing to the world. That's what rewards the man for being a hero. That's why women love men in uniform. It's a primal thing, right? So when you get right down to it, this whole masculinity, femininity thing, even though there's kind of a bit of a social battle out there to rebrand masculinity as toxic, and I guess femininity as you know, the yin yang opposite, which is not feminine in and of itself, but good with man's evil, and therefore the feminization of men, and, you know, anybody can be masculine, anybody can be feminine. Feminine energy is different than femininity. When those lines are blurred, what happens is you take away the primal element of sexual attraction. And I mentioned that, you know, there's pressure, multiple pressures on the family and on the men and women, and indeed on the birth rate, you know, which is another whole deep thought that we could get into, but we won't. But when you get right down to it, masculinity and femininity are the polar catalysts of sexual attraction. That's what they're for. That's why they're there. You know, sex isn't reduced to merely a physical act, when you have that social, spiritual, psychological element tied to it, that human animated element of it that makes us real and gives us consciousness. And the sexual part of our being is masculinity and femininity, which is what creates the sexual attraction that makes the sex happen. So I hope that makes sense, because that's what we live and breathe around here. We don't treat masculinity and femininity as they're accidental or a social construct or something like that. They're a very
Yes.
real design that makes men and women sexually attracted to each other, so that a family forms that is rooted in all the concepts that will create a successful social environment, provided and
Yes.
protected for, so that all the fun and beautiful things can happen and the kids can be raised successfully to perpetuate that wonderful cycle of us while surviving as a race.
Yeah, and it's crazy that we even have to, I think, explain that in this day and age, but I feel
I'm
like
the
we
only
do.
person I've ever heard talk about what I just talked about in the similar
I
words that I used.
I talk about it all the time because I
well,
feel like
good.
it's thrown out. It's thrown out of our culture, of our
Yes.
narrative around relationships, of what's so
Right.
important. And because the summit is about sacred partnership, we're
Mhm.
talking about what brings longevity, what brings passion, what brings power. And it's like we can't leave polarity out of it. We just can't. So I love that you're affirming this, because I think it's crazy that we have to say it, but I feel like we live in a day and age where we do need to say it. We need to go back
We
to
didn't have to
basics.
say it for millennia.
Yeah,
This is it's just the last 50 years where we've had to say it. And
right.
unfortunately, people are getting more in tune with the idea that, there's a difference between gender and sex, and, masculinity is a fluid notion. See, here's the thing about masculinity. Excuse me. Nowadays, you can't just show up in the year 1990 and say, all right, gang, we're not going to do masculinity, femininity anymore. All you men, women don't like each other. We're going to do other things. As a matter of fact, change your gender. Okay. It's the cool thing to do, because everybody just would have gone, what? All these, this has to be done one step at a time, slowly,
Right.
over the course of a socio-economic epic. Okay. Basically. And I've been alive long enough that I've seen it happen before my very eyes, and it's shocking. It's amazing. And I'll tell you what happens when you get to the point in society where you go, hey, masculinity is whatever you need it to be. The new masculinity is undefinable. Well, whenever you think about this, okay, this is something that I just recently started thinking about, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Whenever you take a well-established concept and you take away the definition of it, you take away any rooted, concrete meaning to it, what happens? Well, that concept ceases to exist. It is no more. If masculinity can be whatever you want masculinity to be, then there is no masculinity. There's a word in the English language called masculinity that is represented by a whim, not by any concrete reality. I think plenty of people could argue that God has become such a word. Eternity has become such a word. Whatever you need it to be, it'll be there for you. And it's a kind of a solipsistic view of life. It's the world it's the universe revolving around ourselves to be what we need it to be, when really that's not the way it is. There are very real ways masculinity and femininity polarize each other. And I think the biggest tragedy, Emilia, is that people are missing out when they deny it. It's a wonderful part of life. Yeah.
It is. And it's so important in a healthy relationship, because it doesn't matter if it's homosexual or heterosexual, you still need that energy flow.
That's very
If
true.
there's no, if there's, because I was just about to ask you, what does it mean to really connect with somebody? Because that's one of the things that I know you talk about, but it's like, does it have to do with this? Does it have to do with masculine and feminine? Does connection have to do with that, or can you have connection without that?
Well, I think it's very key that what you said, that you do not have to have a heterosexual relationship for masculinity and femininity to be elements of it. It actually proves the point, because in most of the homosexual relationships or non-heterosexual relationships that I know of, there is a masculine feminine element to it. I mean, they're non-binary people, I know.
Yeah.
But even in homosexual relationships, lesbian, gay relationships, there's a masculine and a feminine in it, right? So the sexual polarity still works the same way.
Isn't that crazy? Because we're talking about energy. We're not talking about physicality.
I would agree that the energy is tied to the femininity or masculinity, respectively. Okay. Some would argue differently, but I don't see it. I think masculinity and femininity, in order to be polarized, have to remain entities unto themselves, and the energy is what polarizes. I mean, it's like a magnet, right?
Yes.
But to answer your question about connection, I think we live in a world nowadays where we have to have black and white, and there's no gray area and no middle ground. So in other words, if you vote a certain way, all of you are horrible for this reason. You're all communists or racist or whatever you are because you voted this way. All of you. Well, that's never going to be true. Always and everything are two words to be used very cautiously in the English language because it's almost never the case. There's always a gray area. So I believe that masculinity and femininity, like I said before, are the catalyst of sexual attraction. That's what they exist for. So I'm of the opinion that not everything in the human experience has to therefore be masculine or feminine. I think if anything, that kind of conversation creates a rift between men and women who should be in partnership and relationship together by brainwashing us into thinking we're polar opposites and that we can't understand each other, can't relate to each other. We're a completely different species. Well, the way I've always put it is, if my dog runs away or your dog runs away, Amelia, we'll both be sad and nervous looking for the dog. And if you and I both hit Powerball tomorrow, we'll both be ecstatically happy, because those are human things. Okay, they're not, doesn't matter whether you're feminine or masculine. You're either upset or you're happy because of those things. So, like I said, my wife and I are hot for each other. We're very sexually attracted to each other, but we're also best friends. Well, the connection is there above and beyond the sexual attraction. Now, I believe in something, and this is something I've talked about in my work, called connectability. I don't think this is talked about nearly enough either. It seems like an original thought every time I get on an interview to talk about it. But I think if you're going to go out and try to meet the person of your dreams and have a successful long-term relationship with them, and you know, let's extrapolate a little, a successful business relationship. If you're a salesperson trying to get customers, if you want to have a new best friend, if you want to start playing golf and have guys to go play golf with on Sunday, I believe you need to be a connectable person. And this is yet another thing that's been lost in the self-focused culture nowadays. Give me what I want. We have a phrase called deserve what you want, which means I need to be the kind of person that the person I want to attract is attracted to in return. That's another unheard of concept. When I first penned the book, I ran it in the search engine, which was Yahoo at the time, prevailing. And it had been said once in the history of the internet in 2005. Charlie Munger, right, who was Warren Buffett's surrogate for years and years, a fellow billionaire, said it at a college commencement that he was invited to speak at. You know, you're going to have to deserve what you want. But those 4 words in quotes had been uttered in the internet once.
Wow.
Ever. Okay. And so it was a novel concept. Instead of, I already deserve it, give me what I want. You know, you here, come be my wife and do my bidding. You be my husband and pay all my bills and take care of me. You know, that is still the prevailing thought amongst the dating advice that's designed to sell books rather than actually help people. So being
Oh.
connectable, I guess by proxy almost, is never talked about because it involves being your best self. Think about it, okay? And I've come up with a whole bunch of these that I believe are true and some of them that are negotiable. But there are certain traits that, notwithstanding someone being psychologically broken or perhaps loving drama or, loving discord or being psychologically broken in some way, there are certain traits that most people who are sane universally find attractive. Okay. I have a way of styling this. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and do that for your listeners. I would love to have a dishonest, lying, cheating, black-hearted boyfriend who's on his deathbed. Said nobody ever.
Ever.
Right? So if you start checking the boxes of being the kind of person who everybody likes, the more of those check boxes you have going for you, the easier it is going to be just to basically get along on a first date with someone. Then you can realize after that, are you going to be compatible? Are we sexually attracted? Do you have my same sense of humor, et cetera, et cetera? But optimism instead of pessimism, right? Punctual on time instead of late, reliable rather than flaky, right? Honest instead of a liar, healthy instead of sickly. The list goes on of traits that I think we can all agree are the good ones to have if we're going to want to relate to someone, right? And that's how you can be connectable, right? Now there's some that are very debatable. Like I think physical looks are very, very subjective. Some people actually love to be boring together. So where some people may say, well, obviously being exciting is an adventurous has got to be one of your connectable traits. No. Some people love being homebodies and love being very boring. Well, those people would get along, right? But that's one of the more subjective ones. But there's a whole host of these that are just, it's laughable to think that if I'm mean to people and I kick small animals and, I dislike everything and I'm negative and I lie and cheat and steal, that I'm going to be a great partner for someone and someone's going to recognize me as such. It's a joke. Literally, right. You're smiling over there. So, I mean, that's how you can become the kind of person who would connect with someone else. People who are confident as opposed to people who lack confidence. I would call that a connectable trait. I would call that universal. I think even when people aren't confident, they hope someone will help come along and inspire confidence in them. Two people who lack confidence aren't going to do well together. So when you get in front of someone and you're optimistic, generous instead of, very selfish, there's another one right there. We've already mentioned it before. And you just present as you're going to be this kind of person, then you become easier and easier to like for the person across the table from you. And like I said, Emily and I met that morning, and both of us had done that self-work. We'd both come from a marriage where we were manipulated and kind of gaslit into thinking we were the crazy ones when our partners were crazy. And if you know anything about how mental illnesses, profound ones tend to work, they're very selfish. The world revolves around them. And so, we were giving and hoping, and nothing was changing for the better. And so what happens though, even though people are optimistic and generous, are often targets of those very selfish people because they'll indeed give more and try harder, even when they're yelled at for not doing enough, which is broken and dysfunctional. When two optimistic, generous people meet, the sum of the parts isn't 1 + 1. It's 5 or 10 or 50, because we're continually giving and continually looking out for each other and hoping for the best. And we see the best because we're both trying. So that connection is the combination of clearing out all those baseline factors that allow us to like each other, those connectable traits, getting those out of the way so that we have clear vision into, okay, how, are we compatible in the relationship sense? What are our thoughts on spending money and what a vacation looks like and what God we pray to and which lever we pull in the voting booth and what we're going to have for dinner and how we raise children, how we discipline children. Then we start thinking about all that and realize, my goodness, she and I think a lot alike. And then we can be best friends. And where I think all this culminates is if you think about, like I said, for every one of those virtues, there's a perversion of it. A lot of times people think the opposite of love is hate. I've come to the conclusion in my travels and hearing a lot of people talk about this subject that yes, love, God, if God is love, then the perversion of that is fear. And you want to know the secret to true love is incredibly simple. Maybe not easy, but simple.
Yes, I want to know.
Stop being afraid of each other. You get rid of the fear, then you're free to love. And that's what I think Emily and I have discovered.
Yes, that you're on the same side. You're not adversaries, you're partners.
Right. I have people who come to me, Emilia, and they go, well, my wife of 6 years said this to me last night. What did she mean by that? And my answer is always the same. It's, I don't know. Did you ask her?
Exactly.
He would know more than me. And I always get, I could never do that. Well, there's a blockage there.
Right.
There's a divide. There's a wall that's keeping them from communicating. And that, you see, people say that communication is the bedrock of a relationship. Well, trust is the bedrock of communication. If you trust each other, then you'll communicate. When you don't want to say something, you want to keep your cards close because you don't trust what's going to happen. You don't trust that that's a safe place to express the truth, right? That's fear there. So when couples can be truthful with each other, they know what's going on in each other's heads. They agree with each other or they don't. I mean, I know what's going on in my wife's head. Therefore, I'm not afraid of it. And it's very similar to what goes on in my head. And since I've resolved my own demons and exorcised them for the most part, I'm not afraid of it. Right. So it comes full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Because it's so important to have that basis of trust and friendship so that you can create something more.
There's a lot of talk about staying out of the just be friends zone for both men and women. It's a well shop-worn trope in the dating relationship world. The problem with just be friends isn't the friends part, it's the just part. Because it's off-putting to say to someone, well, you're such a good friend. I think we should just be friends. We shouldn't spoil our friendship, with sex. That's where that's coming from. That's me putting someone at arm's length because I'm not sexually polarized by them, but they haven't done anything to hurt me. Right. So I don't want to be rude to them. I just don't want to be their lover. I'm not attracted to the sexual polarity that we've talked about so far. The masculine, feminine dance isn't going on there. But what happens is if you're with someone for the rest of your life, you shouldn't be at odds with each other except for the sexual polarity. My wife is my favorite person. She's my best friend. And interestingly enough, and this is something else people don't give a lot of thought to. If I know who I am and I know what my values are, and I feel comfortable that I'm doing the best with what I've got, even though it is a lifelong journey, of course, none of us are perfect, then it's perfectly reasonable that I will like who I attract because they'll be looking for someone like me too if they've done that journey correctly. I think most people, you talked about why do people settle and they get in the wrong relationships. It's because they don't trust that. It seems too good to be true. I mean, I get guys who come to me and they go, I can attract women all day long until they're women I'm attracted to. That's because they're fearful. They're in their own way. They don't believe that they could possibly get a woman they actually like to be attracted to them.
Mm-hmm.
So the limiting beliefs come in and the fear comes in and it keeps you away from love, keeps you away from being connectable and being afraid instead of courageous, I would argue, is an anti-connectable trait for most men. Most women are disgusted by men who lack courage. So, all of this, again, it all ends up revolving around the same axis. And it's an axis of love versus fear, masculine, feminine polarity that makes the world go round. But I think it is really unfortunate that people here stay out of the just be friends zone and somehow conflate that with, I shouldn't be friends with my spouse, because I just think that's really bad advice. I mean, my wife and I, like I said, are best friends and we're lovers, and I think that's great. And so does she.
Yay. That's awesome. So then how can a woman increase her chances of finding a man
Well, we
that
already
she
talked about
connects
it.
with?
Be connectable. Work on, if you have those baseline traits that everybody finds attractive, then, you're going to have cleared away so many roadblocks that so many people struggle with. The only other two things I would add to that is ladies, don't be afraid to be feminine. Feminine is the superpower.
Yep.
I think a lot of times women get angry at men, tell men to stop being toxic and masculine, and then appropriate virtuous masculinity for themselves, which leaves the guys wondering what happened. And I think that's kind of the social smoke and mirrors that goes on. Ladies, you don't have to be men. The great revenge for whatever a man has done to you, either systemically or personally over the years, is not to become him. It's to become a wonderful feminine, the wonderful feminine, and then just make sure that the guys who don't deserve what they want don't get to partake of it. My wife in many ways is what I would call toxic feminine. I was providing and protecting, and it was never good enough. Or I was accused of doing the opposite. That's toxic. I'm not being rewarded for providing and protecting with joy and peace and love and nurturing and having my batteries recharged. I'm being scorned, and I'm being punished, and I'm being sent into disarray. And, obviously that's symptomatic of the mental illness, but it's not non-toxic is my point.
Right.
I'm being masculine, and I'm not getting rewarded with the feminine. But like I said, I think it's the higher calling, the joy, the fun, and the peace, and the comfort, and the nurture is everything we live for on weekends. That's what makes femininity great. So I would say, don't be afraid to be feminine, ladies. It's wonderful. It's a super.
Yes.
I
got so.
And
Thank
the other thing is, men and women who actually like the gender they're trying to attract do a lot better with it. Think about it, ladies. If you meet a man and he's just horny, but he can't stand women, what are his chances? I hope they're not very good. So, we get women who come to us, Emilia, and they'll go, well, Scott and Emily, all men are lying, cheating jerks who only want one thing. Can you find me a good husband? And the answer is no.
No, yeah.
I mean, and the sad part is a lot of times this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and this is not gender specific. A woman will be very sexually attractive visually and not like men and be very bitter and say, well, all they want is sex, and then they kick me to the curb, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because she's very sexually attractive. But no one's going to get in a relationship with her because she can't even stand men at all, let alone that particular guy.
Right.
And again, there's plenty of guys out there who don't like women but are very horny who will take advantage of that. So it's an Ouroboros, right? Dog chasing its tail. So that's very, very unfortunate. And I know you and I are both in practices that help try to rid the world of that scourge. So
yes. Yes. So
women who like men and who maybe have forgiven men for specific men for things that have happened. I mean, guys will come to me and go, my goodness, your first wife ruined your life. How can you possibly still like women? Well, it was a woman. It wasn't women writ large. Men and women are
Right.
designed to be in partnership. And just remember, it's a dirty little trick being played on us to divide men and women.
Yes. And we're
Don't fall for it.
complements.
Yes.
What's really cool is we're complements. That's a big one to unlearn, I think, is the adversary model
Yes.
that we get brought up in. Yeah.
Along those lines, here's a superpower. I will grant your listeners superpowers right now. Most people, when one person, when a series of bad people they've even allowed into their life do them wrong, they allow themselves to get embittered and angry and to hate this person who's done this to them. And it eats you from the inside. And that's exactly what the person who harmed you would love to happen, is to live rent-free in your head forever, ruining your life continually, even after they may be dead and gone. Well, when you let someone who's hurt you run rent-free in your head like that and create bitterness and foment discord between you and the entire gender you're trying to attract, what you've done is you've granted them superpowers over your life, that they're the last person who deserves it.
Right.
They own you. They own you. Okay. So if you just say no to that, and you say, I've seen people, I don't want to sound Pollyannish, but I've seen massive transformation just on that last sentence I just ordered. I just
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait a minute. This person does own me. I'm consumed in negativity because of what this person did to me. That they don't deserve that. They don't get to control me. They don't get to keep abusing me and hurting me still. And then you just say, well, you know what? They're forgotten. That happened. It's over. I moved on. Because the greatest revenge, if you want, is actually served warm. It's the warmth of you going out and creating a new life and not letting them have power.
Right.
Think of it this way. I mean, don't even think of it as revenge. You just stop thinking about them. Just put them in the rearview mirror, learn from that, and move on. But I'll tell you what, my ex-wife is not a big fan of my happy relationship with my wife over the last 16 years. Let's just say that. But that's fine. There's nothing I could do about it. It's not something I should blame myself for, that she doesn't like that.
Right. That's you're creating your life on your own terms. I love it. I love it. So
it's called resilience, by the way. There's a proliferation of resilience coaches now I've seen. Resilience is being able to bounce back instead of going splat. Yes. And that's what it's all about, what we just talked about.
Yes. And thank you so much, Scott. It was so delightful to discuss this with you. I just want to let everybody know where to get your gift. Okay. So right below here is the link to How to Take Control of Your Dating Life by Emilia McKay. Yep. And it's keys2bliss.com/bonus, but you guys will see it below.
Keys2bliss.com.
Keys2bliss.com. Yes. So bonus. Bonus. Yeah. So you brought up a lot of really great points. I love that this is just an example of move forward, create your life. And yes, we are men and women, and there's a reason for that. And let's not put that to the side. Let's integrate that back into our partnership, into our union.
Love it. Use it to your advantage. Don't fight it. It's why it's there.
Yeah, it definitely makes for great sex when you have polarity, doesn't it?
Don't get me my husband and wife don't. My husband and I don't believe in this masculine and feminine stuff, and our sex life is fine.
Right. When was the last time you had sex? Last year. Yeah, exactly.
My wife and I destroy each other like rabbits on the regular.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for your wisdom and everything you've shared with us. And I will look forward to seeing you again soon, Scott.
Thank you.
Bye.